This variation is a continuation of variation 1. In variation 1, we had circular movements with the up bows and finger action at the frog. If you remember, that was this. Now we have circular movements both for the up bows and the down bows. A good way of preparing this is to work only with the bow. So you start off with the bow, you stretch your fingers slightly, and you curl them again. Make sure you don't stretch them further than your thumb and your fourth finger, which are the shortest fingers, can get back without a jerk. If you stretch them all the way, then you won't be able to get back without a jerk, and you want a slow, controlled movement. Then you move from side to side. That's the same movement as going up and down, excepting that you're tilting your hand forward a bit, and that will move from side to side. Stretch your fingers and curl them. Stretch and curl. That'll take a bit of time to be able to do. Next thing is to do a circular movement. First use only your fingers, and then you add your wrists. That will give you a bigger circle and your fingers don't have to work so hard. This is going to be up bows. And then you do the same thing the other way around. You're basically combining the up and down movement with the side to side movement. This is going to be down bows. Use only your fingers and then add your wrist. Just makes the circle bigger. Give yourself some time to master this. This is very important for bow technique and worth every effort you put into it. Next thing is to integrate this with the violin. I would suggest to start with scales. Start using only up bows because you can already do that because you learned that in variation 1. Etc. And then you do the down bows. It's the same movement, it's just the other way around. It's a movement which is almost only done by the hand and the wrist. The arm hardly moves at all. That's important because when it goes fast, you can't move your whole arm at that speed, but you can move your hand and your wrist at that speed. There's a rule basically in violin playing, particularly in bow technique, the faster the movement, the less part of your body can move, because if you have a fast movement and you're using your entire arm, that's going to weight you down and that's going to slow you down. So the faster the movement, the less of you actually moves, and that's very important to do this just with the fingers and the wrist at first, even when you're doing it slowly, because you won't be able to get it up to speed if you do it with your whole arm and stiff fingers and wrist. Besides, you're supposed to learn to use your fingers and wrist in this variation, so not using them would be besides the point. Have some patience with this. This is a tricky one. It's not easy. And do it slowly. Make sure your movement is correct and do not speed up before you can actually do the movement correctly. You'll get a lot more benefit from doing it very slowly than from speeding up too soon. Now, when you get to actually working at the variation, there are a few things you should bear in mind. The first thing is that the fourth finger should not be on top of the stick. It should be in front of the stick. That's very important because if it's on top of the stick, it will slide off. If it's in front of the stick, it won't. You'll be able to do this. That's very, very important because the fourth finger is working very, very hard in this variation because once again, we're all at the frog. So make sure your fourth finger is placed so that it can't slide off of the stick. That's the one important thing. The next thing which is helpful in this variation is to tilt your bow slightly with the stick towards the fingerboard. Let's see, I can show you that you can see it. Tilt it slightly like that. That will give you a bit more control playing, I'll exaggerate like that, than if you're playing with all the hairs. So that's the next thing to bear in mind. And the third thing you have to remember is to keep your elbow well below your wrist the whole time that you are doing this, because if your elbow is too far up, you're jamming your wrist and your fingers and they can't be flexible. So keep your elbow below your wrist so that you can do these movements. Okay, now the first thing I would recommend is to practice this variation using only the up bows. So that would be like this. So that you really work at the up bows and really master this movement. And then you do the same thing, only using the down bows. Doesn't matter how slowly you do it, the main thing is that it's controlled and that you're doing the movement correctly. Now, when you can do that, it can be a good idea to exaggerate the difficulty so that what you then actually have to do is easier. What I do is I double the down bows. So I go... So I'm making it more difficult for myself so that what I actually have to do is easier if I only have the normal down bow. So that's another way of doing it. Another thing, when you get to the chords, open up your angle a little bit, because in this variation, once again, we're only at the frog of the bow and we get very much closed in like that. You need to open up your angle. So when you go... open up a little bit, because then you're not only closed in the whole time. Okay, good luck with this variation. It's a tricky one. It took me a while to master. And don't play it faster than you can play it. Don't play it faster than you can play it controlled and well. Also, don't try to play the whole thing through at first, because you need to be quite strong in your fourth finger and in your hand, and you might need to build that up slowly. If you work at these movements step by step, you will be doing a lot for your bow technique. You do not have to be able to play it perfectly up to speed the first time round.